Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Tom Hebner, worldwide leader of the Cognitive Innovation Group at Nuance Communications, a 14,000 employee global company whose speech solutions support up to 80 different languages. Tom has held numerous positions at Nuance, including Senior Director, Proactive Engagement Professional Services, Senior Director, Cloud Strategy and Solutions, and Director of Professional Services at VUI Design Lead. His current focus is on applying the latest advancements in machine learning and artificial intelligence to augment, automate, and improve customer service. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
So I wonder if you could start by just going back a bit. You've been doing voice since before voice was really cool, like in the late 90s. What have you seen in terms of that road?
It's a good question. It's interesting. I put my first natural language system live in 2001, and back then there was an excitement about the ability to speak. And these are all phone-based systems, and they're starting in the 90s when speech recognition mainstream was really in IVRs, these voice response systems that are in front of large enterprise companies. And I I had a system that had been working on that was enabled you to use your voice, but it was really more of a directed kind of conversation. It was use your own using our words. Tell me what you need. And I put my first natural language. Please tell me in your words. And what fascinated me at the time was that the technology worked incredibly well. Because it was new, so everyone was watching the system very carefully from the customer side, from our side, and we listened to these live utterances come in, these live things that people were saying to the system, and sometimes we wouldn't understand in the room what the person had said, and the system got it perfectly right. So we were shocked by how awesome technology was, but what was more important to the learning was what we did with it, what the company did with it, how we handled those responses. So we can recognize what these people say and what their intent is very well, but then how you handle them, right? Do you have a good experience following that? Do you solve their problem quickly? If they need to get to a person, do you get them that right person the first time? These other things, the more subtle things that people didn't talk about as much, became much more important to how successful a conversational system would be versus the actual core speech recognition working. So it's something that even today, as people talk about the Alexa in their home and these smart speakers coming out, everyone's very floored by how good the recognition quality is. And for me, it's much more about how much did it solve my problem versus how good the recognition is.
So you're talking about times before even mobile phones, really, before smartphones.
Correct. Yeah. This technology, the ability to understand meaning, NLP, NLU. It's one of the cornerstones when people talk about AI today. They say, well, yeah, AI and NLP, and it's a machine learning model that has been in production for almost 20 years now, running at scale. So it's interesting. It's an interesting time for me personally, having lived and deployed, personally deployed, tens of, where Nuance has deployed hundreds of these machine learning models in the form of NLU out in production systems, either over a virtual assistant on a mobile phone or on the web, or a phone system, IVR system. We've been doing this and building them and optimizing them and maintaining them and have all these best practices built up around it. And now suddenly there's an AI revolution where the things you need to do to build and maintain a machine learning model are the same as the things we're doing for a long time. So it was a weird world of kind of like welcoming all these people to this world we've been in for a while, but also understanding that there are new capabilities and new things you can do with this technology to push it beyond what we've already done with it. So it's a pretty cool time.
So are you really today using what you were using sort of way back when, except a better version, or did something have to get reinvented along the way?
I think it's a combination. The core algorithms in NLU, there's a lot of them. The one we used 20 years ago, where we've made a lot of advances on, and we actually have some new things we're doing in the lab and new things coming out. But the thing that we learned very quickly was the most important thing to a machine learning model is the data. The data you put in, the data you take out, even more importantly, what you don't use, and then in optimization, making sure that the data you're using to build your model matches the way people are interacting with your model. And I think that's where our core expertise lie, and the things that we've done to be able to be successful. The performance of these systems, when we first put them live, my first one in 2001, it was about 75% accurate. And we were excited about that. That was amazing. And the ones we put live now, they launch around 90% accurate, 91, 92, and we optimize them from there. So and that's been compute power improvements, algorithmic improvements, and then a lot of just learning and knowledge and best practices about how to use the data.
So what's the challenge today? Is it voice recognition, or is it what to do with once you've recognized the voice?
It's both. There's still a lot of advances happening with actual recognition. And when I say voice recognition, that's fairly mature. Actually understanding, breaking phonemes down into words. You have a microphone button on your phone now that does that very well. So that's a pretty mature technology. Really, where I think of voice recognition, I think of more language understanding, understanding your intent, and intents and concepts. That's also pretty mature. If you say, I need to transfer $100 from checking to saving, it'll get the intent as transfer money. It'll get concepts of $100 and account concepts of checking and saving. That works fairly well as well. We have that live in a lot of our VAs and our conversational tech. Where I think the challenge with conversational user interfaces overall is around actually engaging in a dialogue. So, I have an Alexa at home. I have all the Google Home. I'm a nerd, right? So I have all these things cluttering up my kitchen. And I have a 2-year-old at home, and he loves that Despacito song. So I always have to ask Alexa, I say, play a Despacito remix from Spotify. If I leave off remix, if I leave off Spotify, if I say anything wrong, it's going to play some other version or some shortened version or something else. But when it works, it seems amazing, right? I say it and then it understands it, and you're like, wow, look how advanced the technology is. The challenge becomes, what do you do beyond that, right? That's question answering. I gave it a command. It was able to parse it apart and answer it. That's, this kind of speech recognition, language understanding. What if I needed to engage in a dialogue? What if what if on my smart speaker at home, I had the ability to, I was driving my car and I got to crack my windshield. I could say, hey, Alexa, I cracked my windshield. And it was able to connect to my insurance carrier and engage in a conversation with me. That's going to be a conversation. That's going to be, which car was it? And then they're going to have to check and see what level of coverage I have, and have I had any other claims this year, and what level of coverage do I have, and all this whole kind of business process conversational thing. That's the bigger challenge with conversational technology. Is it's not necessarily the recognition that's fairly mature, but it's really the dialogue, and what to do beyond simple answers.
So how far away is that?
It's a good question. It's something that we're focused a lot on. It's something that I think the market doesn't isn't there isn't a wide market awareness of really the state of AI and the state of conversational technology. There's this thought, because of some of these amazing experiences that have been made available, that are very strong dynamic question answering, some of these command and control, setting timers, setting alarms, playing specific songs, these kind of things make you feel like, hey, we're really close. The reality is, everything that happens on your smart speaker, everything that happens, any conversational tech you're talking to, somebody had to design it, and somebody had to write exactly, here's what it responds to you, and here's the conditions by which you do these things. So there's still it's something called, and you mentioned on my background, VUI design, VUI design, voice user interface, and this is something that Nuance founded. In the late '90s, we started the first folks that were VUI designers doing this work, and it's all large tech companies now have these VUI teams, because as you start getting into conversational tech, the path typically is, you're like, hey, cool, I can recognize these things. Let me recognize them. Like, oh, now I have to do something with them. Hey, let me have them, where before the user would hit a button. Now, if they say this, it'll do the same thing as a button. And you quickly realize, well, that doesn't have a whole lot of value. I actually need to design a conversation that's engaging and that brings people down a path and corrects them if they have problems. And that's a pro skill, this skill to actually do VUI design. And it's one of the things that makes Nuance different than a lot of people. We have a huge, I think we have a 70-person team of VUI designers. This is what they do for a living. They live and breathe this every day. And what they do for their job is understanding what the conversation is supposed to do. For an enterprise, it's typically understanding what their business process is. I was working with an airline once, and I got to sit down with the lost baggage SME. I would I would never want that job. But he was a subject matter expert for lost bags. It was, I mean, I wanted to give him a hug. But what we had to do was sit down with him and go through the whole process because we were going to automate it and build a conversation for it on a conversational system. And in order to do that, the buoy designer had to understand the whole process so that we could get it encoded. And that still happens today. So we're putting our effort, our research, and our investment is on how do we auto learn that? How can we see what's happening in a contact center, for example, where there's millions of conversations happening? Can we mine those conversations, transcribe them into text, and then mine those conversations for patterns? And say, when people say, I lost my bag, what is the typical follow-up question? What are the 7 follow-up questions? And can we start, instead of coming in and sitting down with that baggage SME and saying, hey, what's the process for lost bags? We come in and say, hey, according to your contact center data, this is the process for lost bags, and this is what's happening in reality today. Is this correct? Start taking steps towards automating some of that work and making it faster, easier to do along the way to get us to the point that we can start quote unquote auto learning these dialogues. So your question was a simple one: how long until we get there? And the answer is fairly complex. I think in the next year or so we can start shortening the time it takes to learn how to have these dialogues, but to have a fully autonomous dialogue learning system, I think is still years away.
So what do companies want when you're dealing with companies outside the big brands, and they're dealing with millions of customers around the world? What, in terms of voice, what are they asking for? What are they looking for?
It's really about what problems do they have that need to be solved, and that's the thing I'm excited about with this new SIG role that I've taken on is we get a chance to work with customers that are willing to take risks, customers that have problems that they haven't been able to solve with technology that hasn't necessarily been proven yet, and that's where we get to kind of play that role. There's not a lot of vendors out there that'll come. Most vendors come with, hey, here's our technology that solves these problems. Do you have these problems? And the customer says, I do. Let's solve those. We come more of a, here's the things that haven't been solved for you. So, in the enterprise space, a lot of it is around the contact center and the cost of maintaining all these humans that aren't necessarily doing high value work. You go to some these companies that do trading and focus on investors, and those they have a very high value contact center. The folks there are doing more consulting and help work, but a lot of our enterprise companies are dealing with basic tasks that could be automated, and the problem is that their volume in their contact center, be it through chat or through phone calls, isn't going down. It's either staying the same or increasing, and so their costs are going up over time. And there's no easy way for them to maintain their business with this increasing cost. So these are the kind of problems they tend to come to us with and say, how can AI technology, how can conversational technology help solve some of these problems? Can we automate some of the things that humans are doing, or can we make sure we get to the right human the first time so the people aren't spending time bouncing callers or bouncing users around from one person to another? How do we use your technology to solve these problems? Those are the kind of things people tend to come to us with.
Do you have companies that also come across something like Dom and Domino's and say, hey, there's another application, we could actually do something with that's unrelated to what Domino's is doing?
So what do you mean specifically?
Well, like the Domino's app, you can obviously talk to the app. So the consumer behavior is different. Another company could see that who's not selling pizza but dealing with something else, saying, hey, that feature would help us a whole lot.
Oh yeah, I mean the things like Domino's Dom or our VA and USA's mobile app. These examples are the other customers see those and go, I want that. It's the best thing that Nuance does is we build these experiences, these conversational experiences, in some of these large public companies that work very well. Because then other companies come and say, "Hey, I want that." It's barely a customer that I go to that doesn't say, "Hey, you guys work with USAA. We want what they have because it's awesome, and here's our problems we want to solve." So that's something we run into all the time. And yeah, it's a partnership where we help our customers, not just them saying, "Hey, I'd like to apply their tech to this." We come and say, "Hey, here's how the tech is being used out in the market today. What problems do you have, and let's work together to see what we can solve."
So, in addition to the technology evolving through this whole road, is consumer behavior changing as well in terms of consumers basically relearning how they talk to a machine?
Yes and no. And I have a little emotion behind that. Yes and no. Because this technology, speech recognition and natural language understanding, cut its teeth in IVR in these phone systems. It was where it got first large scale production deployments and a chance to really prove out that it could work. And unfortunately, the IVR market, the people that calling these companies had been trained by early versions of the technology to speak one or two words. We have one of our customers we looked at, and we built a virtual assistant on their mobile app and website, and also have their phone system. On the phone system, people spoke an average of 2 to 3 words to a how can I help you. On the virtual assistant, they had an average of 8 words. So people are learning that they can say very distinct and very long and specific phrases to automated systems, to conversational systems. But the old-fashioned phone systems, where this technology has existed for a long time, people are still saying 2 or 3 words. They don't. The general population hasn't really. We haven't seen a real shift in behavior change when it comes to calling, which is I say the motion behind it, because that's still a high volume channel. Still, there's massive amount of people calling enterprises every day, and the technology for years has been able to do so much more than it's doing because the users won't use it the way that it can be used.
But like your example of having to play a certain song through Alexa, you have to learn as a consumer, I have to say these words for it to get this result.
Hmm. And the difference with Alexa and a enterprise phone system, with Alexa, I bought it and I use it and I know I can use it to play songs. With some of these enterprise phone systems, you have a problem or a need from the enterprise, and you're calling to get it solved. You're not necessarily calling to use the automated system. Some people are, like some people use the automated systems to check flight status or transfer funds. That is their way they self-serve. But a lot of people are calling because they don't know if they need automation or they need a person. They just need this problem solved, and their mental model tends to be different. Their emotional state tends to be different, where they're like, I don't know, transfer funds. There's this kind of this nervous energy that, and I know I've used these systems before and they didn't understand me, so I'm just gonna say a couple words. Where Alexa's kind of like, oh, opening your mind to, hey, I'm gonna try this thing. Let me experiment. Let me play. Oh, that worked. Let me play some more. There's a different mental model. So the hope is that speaking to Siri, speaking to your speaker in your home, speaking to these IoT devices, your mental model shifts. The enterprise can take advantage of that. That's still a hope. We're not seeing necessarily. We're seeing the shift on these other modalities that people are definitely speaking and saying a lot more and willing to play and willing to test. But in the old phone systems where there's still a lot of money, the folks aren't really changing their behavior at the pace we'd like to see.
So, are you saying in terms of consumer behavior, consumers? I mean, you'd see years ago people at an airport shouting to their phone, "Speak to an agent! Speak to an agent!" Because obviously the chatbot wasn't working to their effect. Have you seen that gone down over time, where people actually would rather speak to the technology because it can actually do more than a person?
A couple ways to answer that. In looking at all of our conversational tech, even the virtual assistants and things like this, the when we do satisfaction surveys, the happiest people are the ones that solve the problem in automation, and that's because it's fast. Really, what people want is to have their problem solved quickly, and they don't necessarily care if it's through with a human or with automation, as long as it's done quickly. The people that are the most frustrated are the ones that take a long time in any kind of automated system, and then get to a person and have to go to multiple people to solve their problem. Those are the most frustrated because it took the most time and the most effort on their part. So really what we see is in terms of the people, they're the happiest you're going to be is when your problem is solved quickly. And those people screaming agent at their phones were because those phone systems weren't designed well, and had the perception of being in the way of the person versus solving their problem quickly. But the second answer to that is, in having done a lot of analysis of users and user research over the years, there's a population less than 5% that's never going to do any work with automation. They're always going to want to get to human. And there's actually a population that we don't hear about as much, which is actually larger. It's closer to a little less than 10% that will play any automation, no matter how it's designed or works. They will do everything they can to solve their problem through an automated system, and try and try and try. And then there's the rest of the group, 80, 95% of the people in the middle that will, if you have a good experience, they're going to use it, and if you don't have a good experience, they're not. And that's where VUI design and conversational design really becomes very important, because how you design that experience, how you build that experience for those people will strongly influence their behavior. So that's really who we target. And we see that when you have a poorly designed automated system on any modality, people are going to say, get me a human, go away, you dumb robot. If you have a well-designed system that solves their problem or quickly escalates them to a human, that you won't have that behavior anymore, because they're not going to feel like they're blocked. They're going to feel like they're progressing and solving their problem.
So you live in the world of voice and AI, obviously. Where do you see the role of the screens going forward?
That's a great question. There's this kind of dream, where the touch interface, the swipe, tap, click interface goes away. Where you no longer do you go to a website for your bank and navigate around what you want to do. You go to the website of your bank and you automate with face recognition or your voice recognition or a voice print technology, some way of saying, hey, this is me, and they know what you typically do. They know what's most likely for you to want to do next. They offer that up, or they have a microphone or a box for you to type in, here's what it is I'm trying to solve. And that's your interface, and they reach out and they solve it for you. Kind of this quote unquote zero UI type of idea. Is that's the promise of and the dream of a lot of people that have invested in speech technology and conversation technology over the years. And the interesting thing is, a lot of what I described that makes that an amazing experience is predicting based on you what it is that you want. So today's conversational systems, almost all of them, when you come into it, it says, how can I help you? It's using NLP, NLU technology to say, hey, let me understand what it is you need. Some of the more advanced ones, if you call the airlines, for example, the major airlines, they'll greet you by name and they'll say, I see you're flying today. Is that what you're calling about? Those kind of predictions we've just barely scratched the surface. And that's where, when you talk about this future zero UI and this exciting time you don't ever have to navigate or learn or figure out how to use all the burden is on the system to understand what you need. A lot of that heavy lifting is going to be done through prediction and using machine learning for those predictions. And that's where another place that we're spending a lot of our effort and energy is, as people are contacting our virtual systems, our conversational systems, not just blindly saying, hey, how can I help you? Let's see how we can identify them first. We use our voice print technology quite a bit, or even simply just to, buy an ID, or if they've logged into a website, we know who they are, taking all the data about them and building a machine learning model with that, and using that machine learning model to predict what it is that they need. So versus how can I help you? Oh, I need to transfer funds. They come in and say, this person, this bill is due. They always do it monthly, whatever. I'm guessing they want to transfer funds. Hey, did you want to transfer $200 today? Hey, do you want to set that up to be recurring? Like, anything we can do to get that effort down on the user is where we see it going. And that's what's exciting for me. Speech recognition is fairly mature. Language understanding is fairly mature. Conversational design still has work to be able to be efficient and automated. But the real exciting frontier for me is using this emerging AI tech to predict and understand what it is they need without them even having to interact with you.
So you're obviously involved in an innovation group. What are you seeing, or what do you think should occur in other companies that are not companies like yours, that are basically brands? Should they have innovation activities separately from their day-to-day business? Should it be integrated? Should they look to innovation labs like yours for the solutions? What's it look like?
So two answers to that. Of course, they should look to us. But
No, I meant look outside versus creating it themselves.
The one thing, if I was sitting in the seat, if I was the CIO of a large company right now, data. Make sure your data is accessible, make sure it's available, make sure that every one of your front ends can use it. AI is only as good as the data you feed it. And people say that, a lot of people say that. I've lived it. I've built machine learning models off of poor data, and they perform poorly. I have a tech company talking to us right now about building a natural language understanding system to go into their app, and they gave me this data to build it from. Like, hey, we want to see how good your technology works, and I said, it's not going to work well with this data you're giving us. And I was like, I'm not saying that I'm not trying to hedge anything. I'm just telling you, from experience, this data is not going to lead to a great model for reasons X, Y, and Z that I worked through with them and said, we're more than happy to build a model for you, but here's where we'd like the data source to come from, and this is what it needs to look like. These kind of things. So if I'm sitting in one of these brands and seeing all this stuff happening with AI and everything going around. And happening, I would be very much focused on what can I do to make sure my data is available. What can I do to make sure I have the data that we need, that we're accessing it, storing it, leveraging it, and making it available for people and tracking it. Every time one of my customers contacts me, I should know what they did, who they talked to, what was their activity across every channel they might have interacted with. I should be tracking that, and if I'm not doing it today, I should be doing it today so that I'm ready as this AI, as the AI technology emerges. It all is going to be live and feed off of data.
So lastly, what does the world look like in voice in the next couple of years?
I think you're going to see. So there's a lot of things happening right now. There's explosion of these chatbot startups everywhere, and they're getting a lot of attention. I'm kind of two minds. One, with that, there's a lot of attention, a lot of energy, and people are going to invest in trying out building some of these. My concern is the building of a conversation system is a pro skill. It's like you can hand me Photoshop and I could even learn how to use it, and I will create very ugly graphics out of it. I just don't have an eye. I'm not an artist. You give it to an artist that understands the tool, and they'll build something beautiful and amazing. The same thing goes for these conversational systems. There is a design skill in doing this, and I worry with the explosion of a bunch of people that are well-intended, brilliant people, but don't really understand the space, and we might get some fairly poor conversational systems being built, and it kind of looks bad on all conversational systems when you have some bad ones out there. So that's, on the one hand, there's this kind of, are we on the edge of this kind of explosion that's awesome, or is it an explosion of, oh, we have a lot of kind of ugly things that could get out there? Or the other side of it is, I think, a lot more of this intelligence that with all the AI technology that's available, the ability to predict, the ability to understand, the ability to keep context and understand what's happening throughout a conversation. I think we can have nothing to do with speech recognition or chatbots or anything, but outside of that, just the overall intelligence that an enterprise can have about their users, and leveraging that as we're engaging with the user. I think we'll have a lot more smart interactions with the enterprise, where the large enterprises that have built conversational systems and have built them across channels. The next step for them is, okay, how do we make them more intelligent? How do we expand them? I think we're going to see a lot of that over the next couple of years, where you're going to have a lot of systems that you contact, and they're going to know who you are and predict what it is you need without you even having to interact. This much easier experience.
Thank you, Tom Hebner, and thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.